So we'll start from the top. I just have a standard Warré roof. It's made out of scrap wood, so it keeps the ecological footprint very low. There's a wood recycling place near me, and I just go there and look for suitable pieces. And one thing I've learnt, that if you paint it with ordinary gloss paint, exterior gloss paint, you have to do this again every 2 years, sometimes every year. So it's best to find some other kind of way of treating it rather than gloss paint. So I got really tired of having to repaint these roofs. One thing about the Warré, anybody coming to it for the first time thinks there should be ventilation holes through here, and there aren't any. Well, mine is made up of just any old boards, whatever width I can find, and there are slight slits very often between, so there is a little bit of ventilation at the top. So that's the roof. So going down from the top of the hive, the next thing we come to is the quilt. Now, Warré call this the coussin or cushion, but on top of hives in the past in Britain has been some sort of thing called a quilt. So we've called this item the quilt. And basically it's a very simple wooden box, just nailed together with a couple of nails in each corner, again using scrap wood, and underneath it to hold the insulating contents, which in my case is wood planings from an electric planer, but you could use dry leaves, or you could use straw, many different things. Shredded paper, for example, could go in there. And underneath is fixed on just simply a cloth to hold the contents of the quilt, and the cloth in my case is Hessian sacking. So there we are, the quilt. That is an insulating top of the hive, and it also breathes, so moisture, water vapor can go up through the quilt and pass out through any slight cracks at the top. I follow Warré's specification almost entirely, except I'm using slightly thicker walls than his minimum of 20 millimeters. My walls are 25 millimeters thick. I have again the specified rebate in the top ridge, in the top edges of the box. A tip from a Belgian Warré beekeeper, I also have a rebate in the bottom of the wall, and this is to stop the bottom of the wall sticking to the top bars of the next box, so that when you take it off it doesn't lift any of the top bars of the next box. Standard Warré design of top bars sitting in a rebate. I pin mine in. I use very small frame nails, only 1 millimeter by 20 millimeters. I hammer them in and I snip the top off. So I could just show you how I do that by putting them in part of the way, and then I cut the top of the head off. So I'm left with only about 15 millimeters of nail, and then I hammer that in the rest of the way, and that makes getting the thing out later much easier. Of course, there are other ways of doing this, by having a little slot in the end of the top bar and having a pin that fits exactly with the slot, so you just lower the top bar down over the pin. The construction of the box, Warré called his hive the people's hive, and he wanted it to be as simple as possible. So no fancy joints here, just nailed boards. I use 7 nails on each corner. That's all I have, and that's the basic construction. Handles nice and strong, so you can pick up the whole hive if necessary just by the handles. That's the box. My top bars are just any old wood I happen to find around the workshop. Usually I have to plane it to thickness. Now because of that, I end up with a smooth side on the side where the bees will be. And that's not ideal, you want it rough. So what I do, I put a saw into the vise and just clamp it vertically in the vise, and then I take the bar, any top bar, and I just rub the bar across the floor like this to get it really rough. And then to make the wax starter strip that guides the bees of where to build the comb. I use exactly Warré's method. This is a template with a couple of nails in it. It's soaked in cold water first of all. It's placed on the top bar, and I'll have a pan with some hot water in it with some melted beeswax, and I'll simply, using a teaspoon which I've modified slightly to make a little spout, I'll simply pour the beeswax along the edge of the template, and thus I deposit I might do it a few times, I deposit a wax starter strip. And when I take the wet template away, I'm left with the starter strip, and then this is just simply nailed into the box. This summer 2013 we had very un-Welsh weather, especially in July. The temperature went up into the high 20s, and you could see the colonies were having difficulty in cooling themselves because quite big beards formed underneath the alighting board at the front, and sometimes the whole front of the hive was covered in bees that had left the colony because it was too hot inside. So what I did simply is to push the hive forward on the floor until I left about a quarter to a half-inch hole, about 10 millimeters or more, all the way across the front, and that increased the ventilation. Very often you'd see the bees go straight back inside when you did that. And of course the other important thing to do is to keep enough space ahead of the colony development. So especially in hot weather you might want to have an entire empty box underneath the colony. So it's a simple thing to push the hive forward, the whole hive slid forward on its stand, and then when the hot weather has passed you just slide it back again, and that's the solution to your ventilation problem. You have a minimum of 2 boxes, so the colony winters in 2 boxes of comb. The floor is the standard Warré floor I use. Ideally you try and get wood that is 15 millimeters thick. This wood is thicker than that, just any old scrap boards that I found on the recycling dump. So to restore the height of the entrance to 15 millimeters, I have just set in a small piece of wood here. And a nice feature of the Warré floor design is the alighting board, where you can watch the activities of the bees and possibly learn something about what's going on there. Otherwise, very crude construction, just nailed together. If you can use treated timber for the bottom of the floor, the thing lasts a lot longer, but it's not necessary. Sometimes at the dump I see pieces of treated timber, so I use that. So this is the feeder, which is basically the same in Warré's book L'Apiculture pour tout, Beekeeping for All. It's what he called his autumn feeder. It'll hold about 2 gallons of feed, say about nearly 10 litres, and it's for very rapid feeding, much more rapid feeding than the plastic circular feeders that you can buy. When a colony, say a late swarm, has done well, it's built up, but it still only has, say, I don't know, 5 kilograms of stores, and you want to supplement it to get it up to strength in September so that it can safely go into winter. And Warré's feeder is basically just a Warré box nailed together, but then it has a sloping floor in it. That's what I like about his design of feeder. The floor slopes, so it's set in a rebate and just simply nailed at the corners. Then there is a bee way for the bees to come up, and then they come over a board and they go down a gap into the tank where all the liquid is. The liquid could be honey or sugar solution, and you must ensure that the walls inside the tank where the bees go down are rough. The bees must have something to hold on to, and here you can have perhaps 100 bees feeding at once. That's much more than in one of the plastic feeders that you can buy, which are called rapid feeders. So the bees in a really strong colony can empty one of these tanks overnight. It's quite astonishing the speed at which they can take the food down. This particular design of feeder is pretty well identical to what's called in beekeeping internationally the Ashforth feeder. And Warré arranged to have a glass pane over the whole of the top of his, whereas on mine I've just got a perspex or plexiglass or acrylic sheet over part, and if necessary I can unscrew, take these screws out here and remove the acrylic sheet. So that's the Warré autumn feeder. People wonder how they're going to get bees out of the honey box when they want to harvest the honey. Warré suggests that you just smoke the bees down. Well, a lot of people have tried that and have not found it to be particularly satisfactory. They are left with hundreds of bees still in the top box when they want to take it away. So a lot of people have resorted to using clearer boards, and this particular one is an 8-way clearer that you can easily buy from beekeeping suppliers. It's got little holes drilled in the middle. It's placed inside a box or an eek, if you like, and it's fixed onto that. There's a hole for which it's placed on the hive like that. The box with the honey is put on top of it. There's a hole for the bees to smell the queen and want to go down. They come down, go out through the channels, and usually they cannot find their way back in again. But I've not found this to work all that well on a Warré hive. Of course, you must have no queen and no brood in the top box. If you have either of those conditions, then the bees will not leave. You'll still have lots and lots of bees left behind. Another feature of this is that 50 millimeters below the board is important for clustering. People who have made them with much shallower boards find they don't work very well. But I found a much better solution is to revert back to the Porter Escape I used to use on my frame hives, and it's simply a plastic device with 2 springs in it and 2 exits below, and the springs are adjusted to be only 3 millimeters apart, and they're soft enough for the bee to push its way through, but it's too difficult for the bee to come back the other way. So it's placed on the hive like that. The bee's smelling the queen, goes down, enters the hole and comes out past the springs below. And I found that the Porter Escape works much better than the 8-way clearer board. English Warré Beekeeping Web Portal, and this page aims to lead people into all the material that they could find on the web in English on Warré beekeeping. So obviously you can download the book for free here, or you can find out about the printed edition of the book. Initially we gave it away completely for free on the net, which it still is, but a lot of beekeepers found the digital version most inconvenient. They wanted something on paper, and Northern Bee Books said, we'll do it for you on a print on demand basis. So we provided the PDF to Northern Bee Books designer and he reset it. I gave them a photo of one of my Warré hives, only it was exploded so that you could see how the hive is made up of the different parts, and that became the English Warré book. Beekeeping for All was our translation of it. Since then, of course, it's been translated into several languages. I think probably the first was Bienenhaltung für alle, Beekeeping for All in German, beautifully laid out, and you'll notice that the translator, Mandy Fritscher, took quite a bit of trouble to make the German edition look like the original 12th edition of Warré's book. Warré was not alone in inventing this type of hive, which is a vertical top bar hive extended by adding boxes underneath. Over the years we found many precursors. Here I've listed nearly a dozen of them, stretching from Russia all through Europe, even to the United Kingdom. So the concept is not new, and here you can look at all the different variants of the precursors.